finished mine Sunday.
I finished yesterday. I got to the gas.
Answer for this one is 3.
Oh, I'm so excited for Halloween.
Answer to this one is 4. Answer is 6. Alright, the answer is that we can take out a 3, x, and a y from everything and be left with just an x minus 4y in the parentheses.
Stupid.
Ew. Gosh, dang.
Here we go. For this one, you can take out an 8a and be left with 2b minus 3. Holly Collett, you can take a 15.
Oh, yeah.
15ab out of everything and be left with an a plus 2b squared. Multiple choice. Solve this quadratic equation. I need the block letter only.
He just sat up there like, what happened?
Alright, here it is. Construct a rough graph of a function. So example 1. You've got to graph this. So, do you remember where we start from yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to solve this. We want to see if we can solve it.
6 and minus 2.
She says 6 and minus 2. Are those the two numbers that will add to give us negative 4?
No.
Yeah.
It's positive.
6
It should
minus
be
2 is 4.
Oh, no, wait. 6 minus a negative 2 would be 8.
This is 6. Negative 6 and 2.
We can factor it. That's the first decision. So yeah, you can do that, but it would be 2 and what?
Negative 6.
2 and negative 6, because those would multiply to get you the negative 12, and they would add to give you this negative 4 here. So it is factorable, and we've done that. And to get the solutions, or the zeros, you can simply reverse what you put in, because you're going to set them equal to 0 and solve for x, and when you do, you'll get a negative 2 and a positive 6. So those are the zeros. Keep those handy.
Okay, so how did you get 2 and negative 6?
We came up with 2 and negative 6 by trial and error. And here's negative 12. And we need to find the numbers that multiply to give us negative 12. So those would be those pairs there. When it's a negative number, you'll have two sets of factors that are the same, but the signs alternate. It could be this, or it could be this. So you'd have to go through and figure out which pair of those numbers would add to give me a negative 4. And clearly it's not going to be these two. It's not going to be those two. This would give me a positive 4, so that's not going to work. So it's 2 and negative 6. That's why we put in plus 2 and minus 6. But to solve it, to get the zeros, you have to do the opposite of what you put in. Because when you set these equal to 0, you end up just moving them and changing the sign. So it's negative 2 and 6. So that's where it's going to cross the x-axis on the graph, negative 2 and 6. Now what's the next thing we have to find?
The axis of symmetry that was found.
Yeah, we need the axis of symmetry, AOS. And what's the formula for that?
Negative b over 2a.
Negative b over 2a. Where do we find our b and a?
Your B is X.
No, 4x. It's 4. Negative 4. Okay. Well, what
So
if you
you
positive 4 because that is a negative 4?
Well, your a comes from this spot, your b is here, and your c is there. So what's b?
B is negative 4.
Negative 4. So right here, remember the formula is negative to start with. So if you're putting in a negative 4,
It's just negative.
it's negative 4. And then over 2 times a, what's a?
1.
1. Remember that comes from right here. There's no number there, so it's just 1. Alright, so we have to solve that for the axis of symmetry. And it should be a double negative there, so it just changes it to 4 over 2, which is going to be 2. So that's another thing you're going to have to mark down. In addition to the negative 2 and 6, you need an axis of symmetry of 2. And take that to the graph with you. Are there any questions up to this point? I know a lot of you don't like to ask questions, which I guess that's okay, but if you're really stuck and you... will what always be 1? No, A could be any number. The only reason it's been 1 in the ones that we've done yesterday and today is because I've purposely made these equations factorable and with a coefficient of 1 here because that's the easiest starting point. And once we master this, however long that takes, then we'll bump it up a little bit and have a different number here and different kind of stuff. But if you can start with the easiest kind and learn that, then anything after that will be a lot easier. Yep.
How'd you get
Negative 4 is because there's a negative in the formula to begin with. And then we put a negative 4 in for B. Alright. So we have the zeros and the axis of symmetry. What do we need next? The y value, yeah, for the... starts with a V. Vertex, yeah. Not vortex, it's vertex. Alright, so here's the vertex. And to find the vertex, I have to do what with this value here? You have to plug it in to the function.
Yeah.
So you're plugging it into this up here. So it would be 2 squared minus 4 times 2, and then minus 12. And evaluate that for y. 2 squared is 4, and then a minus 8 from 4 times 2, then a minus 12. So we'll have 4 minus 8 is a negative 4, minus 12 is a negative 16. So that would make our vertex 2, negative 16. And you want to mark that down so you can take it over to the graph.
So it's the number you plug in the number you put.
Yeah. That creates the point, and this is in X and Y. Now once you have that, you can go over to the graph and start looking at some stuff before you even get your 2 additional points. Alright, so here's the graph paper. Now you'll notice on the graph paper, yours might have a little more markings than mine, but yours certainly doesn't have 16 down, does it?
No.
No, it doesn't. So, and mine doesn't either. So when you run into a case like that, then here's what you can do, still using the same paper. Instead of using the scale that's on there, you can change the scale. And you can only do it on the y-axis if you want to, if that's the one that you're short on. So I'll change this to blue so it'll show up. And zoom in a little bit more. So instead of negative 1 here, there it is, instead of negative 1 being this, we'll make that negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8, and on down. So we don't have to print up special graph paper just for one problem. And there's your negative 16. So if I had to go down just one movement, let's say I was looking for 15 on the y-axis, I'd have to put a dot in between the hash marks to find a negative 15 if I needed it. So all we've done here is change the scale. But if you change the scale on the y-axis below the x-axis, you have to do that for the rest of it, or at least remember that's what you did. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on up the graph. 12, 14, and 16. So we have a different scale for the y-axis, and don't forget that. Now the first thing we ought to put on here is the vertex. We have to say what?
Can you show me how you've done
Yeah, and notice that my graph paper only goes down to, well, you can only see -8 there going down. Oh, the vertex. How do we get the vertex? Okay, we'll go back to the other slide and then come back to this. So we have to plot 2, -16 on the graph. I'll just stick with blue. And we'll go over 2 and then down 16. So it should be right here. There's the vertex. And also, that's the axis of symmetry, straight up and down through that point. So I'll get my line tool out, and we'll just stick with blue. And mine's going to be off a little bit because I have to draw it first and then move it. So there's your axis of symmetry. And it runs right through the vertex, which I'll mark over that here. And now you have to put your zeros on there. Your zeros were -2 and 6. So we have to put a dot at -2 on the x-axis. That's a strange looking dot. There we go. Thicker marker. And then put one on the 6 over here. Once you do that, you can have an idea of what the graph is going to look like, but you can also go through and pick 2 more points, and we're going to make that a requirement, that we pick 2 more points. Now, do you remember how we chose how we were going to pick the 2 points from yesterday? When we had to find 2 more points up in this area, what did we look at? You have a 0 at -2 and a 0 at 6. So what did we do to choose the 2 points we were going to find? Yeah, we just went over 1 to the outside of it. So here's 6. We want to plug in a 7. And here's -2. We'll plug in a -3. So -3 and 7 is what we'll look at. So we'll bump this up for right now and work down below it. The original equation was y equals x squared, and was it -4x? Minus 4x and then -12. Okay, so we're plugging in a 3, or a -3. Plug in a -3, and let's see what we come back with. That would be 9 plus 12 minus 12, which would give us 9. So I plugged in -3 and came back with a 9. There's 1 point. Are there any questions about how we came up with this? We moved 1 to the left of that left-hand 0 on the x-axis. It was -2, so we made it -3. And we plugged in -3 into the equation. We got -3 back from here, where we plotted the zeros of the function when we solved it. It came back to be 6 and -2. That's where it crosses the x-axis. So that's where we put our points. But to find 2 more points, what we do is we go 1 out from that point. So the next one over is -3. That's how we just chose that. And 1 over from this is 7. That's how we're going to choose that. So when we plugged in -3, we came back with 9. So now we're going to try the 7. So y equals x squared minus 4x minus 12. And we're going to put in 7 to get 7 squared minus 4 times 7 and then minus 12. That's 49 minus 28 minus 12. And that's going to be 21 minus 12, which again is 9. And we spoke about that yesterday, where more times than not, when you're going the same distance from your 0 on both sides, you'll come back with the same number. So this point is 7, or actually, 7 and 9. So we're going to plot -3, 9, and 7, 9 to give us a more accurate graph. -3, 9, and 7, 9. Alright, so we'll go -3, 9, and it's going to be, I need a thicker marker for this one, there we go. negative 3, 9. Now here is 8 right here. Remember, we changed the scale. So there's 8, so I've got to put my dot right there between the 8 and the 10. And I'll have to do the same thing over on this side when I plot 7 and 9. So there's 7 and 8, and there'll be 9 right there. So now when you go to draw your graph, you'll have a better chance of having it to be more accurate. You can also fill in points down here as well. And to do that, you'd have to go to the inside of these points. But for right now, let's see if we can draw this. I'll put it in orange, give it my best shot here. We'll go with that marker. Remember, you got to have a curve to this. And that's the best I can do freehand.
You're killing me.
During my game tonight.
I recorded late, but we'll catch up here. And when we plug in the point one more to the right of this, which is 2, if we go 1 to the right of that, we have 3. When we plug that in, we can also come back with a 4. So with these values, you can make a graph, and I should have, there it is. There it is. All right, for the graph here, remember I'm going to have to, well, do I have to change the scale on this? No, you don't have to. So your zeros were negative 1 and 2. So here's negative 1. I need a larger marker for this. There we go. There's a negative 1, and it was also 2. The vertex we found to be 1/2 and negative 2 1/4. So we have to go to the right 1/2 and then down 2 1/4. So here's approximately 2 1/4 there. So we'll make that dot just as big as the other ones. And for the extra points that I found, I came back with a negative 2 4 and a 3 4. So negative 2 4 would be here, and then a 3 4 would be there. And I'll try to draw this with green, make it just a little bit darker. Alright. Got to make a curve like that. Extend it all the way through the graph.
If we got that right, we can open.